Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. A total solar eclipse passes through parts of Atlantic and central Canada today, while the prairies experience a partial eclipse. Plus, the father of an 11-year-old boy says he's been getting death threats after his son was killed by his roommate's 2 dogs last week. And on the 6th-month anniversary of the Hamas attacks, thousands of Israelis rally in Jerusalem to free hostages.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Solar eclipse chasers armed with lawn chairs and special camera equipment gathered in viewing spots from Mexico's Pacific coast to eastern Canada today. The solar eclipse began over the South Pacific as the moon began to cover up the sun. The first location in continental North America that experienced totality was Mexico's Pacific coast around 2 p.m. Eastern time before the eclipse exited North America and Atlantic Canada about 2 hours later. Hundreds gathered on a beach in Mazatlan, Mexico, to be among the first in North America to witness the eclipse. And in Canada, parts of southern Ontario were plunged into complete darkness in the middle of the afternoon as the region experienced a solar eclipse totality. The street lights even came on in downtown Toronto. Spectators from near and far gathered in viewing spots like Niagara Falls, hoping for a break in the clouds to cover the cloud coverage to witness that eclipse. And I think they got what they were looking for, judging from that footage there. Brian Furman was one of the first eclipse spectators at Niagara Falls this morning and describes himself as a bit of a space nerd.
I was probably one of the first ones out here at about 6 a.m. I just wanted to get a good spot and video the eclipse with both the Canadian and the U.S. falls. I'm a bit of a space nerd, and I think it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see the eclipse.
Carol Giangrande and Brian Gibson have been eclipse chasing for 45 years. The Toronto couple traveled to Kingston, Ontario to witness their 5th eclipse today, calling it an amazing experience.
The first eclipse that we saw together was in Gimli, Manitoba in 1979, and it was really awesome. It just kind of, blew me away, and I was taking pictures, not very good pictures, but it was a thrill, and it was the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada that put it together. We flew out to the airport in Gimli, and they parked the plane there. We got out and watched the eclipse, got back in the plane, went home.
It's just a revelation of the beauty in the heavens. It's just, it is an amazing experience when you see one.
Now, didn't our parents tell us not to stare at the sun? Well, BCN's Naveen Day definitely wasn't following that advice when he filed this report on today's partial eclipse over the prairies.
People across North America had their eyes, cameras, and telescopes fixed on the sun Monday as we had the opportunity to witness a solar eclipse, an awe-inspiring event that captivated observers of all ages. Perry Saby with the Lethbridge Astronomy Society says solar eclipses are not uncommon, but this one was particularly special, despite it only being a partial eclipse from southern Alberta's vantage point.
And they happen fairly regularly every year. However, at any one location on the Earth, over the course of a human lifespan, they are quite rare. So as frequent as they do occur, it's still about every 300 to 400 years in any one spot that is going to be in the path of totality, as we call it. So the fact that we're getting, partial coverage is rather uncommon for in the course of a human's lifetime or a person's lifetime for them to see one of these things.
Saby adds, if you were hoping to see a full eclipse, there's still a chance, but you're going to have to wait 20 years.
Yeah, 2044, there's going to be basically the Alberta solar eclipse. It's going to swing around. If I remember correctly, it's going to swing through either the Northwest Territory or Yukon and then down through Alberta, and then just into Montana before the sun sets. So that's going to be our eclipse, our total solar eclipse in 2044. Hopefully it's not cloudy.
A solar eclipse occurs when the moon travels between an observer and the sun, meaning for that moment in time, the Earth, moon, and sun become aligned. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
The father of an 11-year-old boy killed in a dog attack in an Edmonton home told reporters he never saw the two animals act aggressively towards people. Wesley Grist says the public attention about the killing has been stressful as he grieves and the family prepares for a funeral.
Like, I'm trying to grieve and now I can't because there's all this extra attention going on, and it hurts because, like, I've been unable to cry when I should be crying. I know I should be crying still, but I can't because I'm too focused on all this extra stuff that's coming in from people who know nothing about the situation. People just have to, they want to honor them and show us that they're there for us. Then just stop with all this anger and stop with all this finger pointing because it's unnecessary, and it's not honoring who my son was.
The city of Edmonton says there have been previous complaints about the animals. The child's grandmother, Nancy Pearson, says the boy lived in British Columbia with his mother but was in Edmonton visiting his father for spring break. She says the father rented a room from the woman who owned the two dogs involved in the attack. A deportation hearing has been set for the truck driver who caused the deadly Humboldt Broncos bus crash 6 years ago. Jaskirit Singh Sidhu's lawyer, Michael Green, says the hearing will be held May 24th. Sidhu was sentenced to 8 years in prison for causing the 2018 crash in Saskatchewan that killed 16 people and injured 13 others. He pleaded guilty to dangerous driving charges. The newly married permanent resident from India was a rookie Calgary truck driver when he ran a stop sign at a rural intersection near Tisdale, Saskatchewan, and drove into the path of the bus carrying the junior hockey team to a playoff game. Following more than 7 months of negotiations, WestJet Encore pilot leaders have voted to approve an agreement in principle with their management. Discussions are ongoing as the parties work to finalize contract language for a full tentative agreement for membership ratification. After several consecutive days of late-stage negotiation, progress was made on a number of key issues, including compensation and scheduling. According to Captain Karen Kenny, chair of the WestJet Encore Airline Pilots Association Master Executive Council, who says, quote, throughout the negotiating process, management's refusal to grasp the current labor market conditions in Canada's aviation sector resulted in a mass exodus of pilots in search of better work opportunities. It is significant that management now recognizes that a contract without the required economic and scheduling improvements would result in a continuation of the current pilot attraction and retention crisis at the airline. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada is exploring the possibility of joining the second phase of AUKUS, a U.S.-led alliance with the United Kingdom and Australia, initially focused on building nuclear-powered submarines. Trudeau was at CFB Trenton to unveil Canada's plan to upgrade Canada's military capabilities, which is focused on protecting Arctic sovereignty.
That is certainly what we will be looking at as to what type of submarines are most appropriate for Canada's responsibility in protecting the longest coastline in the world and certainly the longest Arctic coastline in the world. We recognize that with climate change, the opening of the Northwest Passage to ship traffic is going to require a lot more capabilities by Canada to demonstrate and responsibly patrol its own internal waters, and that's where we have framed out in this policy update a need to lean in carefully to determine what kinds of submarines we're going to need for the coming years and how best to procure them.
Turning our eyes overseas, thousands of Israelis rallied outside the parliament in Jerusalem on Sunday to call for a hostage deal. The protest was organized by the families of the hostages to mark 6 months to the day since they were captured by Hamas.
It's 6 months since the 7th of October. The war continues. Blood is being spilled every day, hundreds of people, and our hostages are being held in Gaza. People are waiting for their children, for their parents, for their sisters and their brothers, and our government doesn't seem to care. We can't believe the reality that we're in. It's an impossible reality. It's an impossible reality for us. It's an impossible reality for the Gazans and the people of this country. We just want to live. Right now, this is about life and death, and we want to live.
Meanwhile, Palestinians returned to the southern city of Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip on Monday to salvage what they could from the destroyed buildings that remained a day after the Israeli military announced it was withdrawing troops from the area. One woman says words can't describe the pain she feels to find nothing left of her home. She says through a translator, "I have no words to express my feelings. Our memories were here, our dreams, childhood, and our family that we grew up with. I didn't find anything to salvage. It's all gone. We fled with nothing but the clothes on our backs," end quote. And famine has also been a huge issue for the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Fingers around the world have been pointing at Israel's invasion as being the cause, but according to Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk, there is data being reported showing that Israel is not causing the famine in Gaza.
Right now, we're watching as Gazans have no other choice. These are Palestinians who are at the mercy of their own government. So when you find them in harm's way, again, the question is, who is to blame for this? Why doesn't their government surrender? Why don't they give back the hostages? Why do they ask these civilians to hide hostages in their homes, as has been found in many cases? Why are they asking, why do they teach Palestinian children arithmetic through death and through terrorism and through, again, the Palestinians are the biggest victims of this terrorism and Hamas.
Catch my full interview with Foreign Affairs correspondent Lisa Daftari coming up after Business News. Lethbridge police have charged a 29-year-old woman with drug trafficking offenses after she was located in possession of methamphetamine and fentanyl by an officer conducting a proactive bike patrol downtown. On April 3rd, the officer observed a woman known to have outstanding warrants. She was arrested on her warrants, and during a subsequent search, police located the drugs, some paraphernalia, and over $300 cash proceeds of the crime. Josie Jennifer Beatty, 29 of Lethbridge, was charged and released from custody, but is scheduled to appear in court April 11th. It looks like there will be more space to enjoy at the Crossings branch of the public library. BCN's Naveen Day was there to check out some of the improvements.
Following a renovation and expansion project, the Crossings branch of the Lethbridge Public Library celebrated their grand reopening on Monday. Dignitaries were present for a ribbon-cutting ceremony, followed by a tour of the upgraded facility. As manager of branch services Sarah Head explains, there was extra space in the library that was previously undeveloped.
The expansion and enhancement renovation opened up into about 2,500 square feet of unused space. So where we're standing right now was previously space that was earmarked for future development. And so what we did was pull through this wall. We came through the wall and expanded into this space to give the teens their own distinct area. Their space before was quite small.
Now, this may look like an out-of-place carpet tile, but underneath it is something that will be hidden out of sight for decades, a time capsule. Students from neighboring schools were asked to write letters to put into the time capsule, among other things.
As well, we had a few fun things in there. So a big component of the space is gaming and kind of fun leisure time. And the teen population that we see here plays a lot of Uno, so we put an Uno deck in. And a newspaper, of course, from today.
Head says they plan to open the time capsule in August of 2040, 30 years from the date the library first opened. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Well, the city of Lethbridge is giving residents a few more weeks to provide feedback on snow routes. The community survey launched on March 18th will now close on April the 28th. The extended date will allow for more residents to share their thoughts and input on phase 2 of changes to snow and ice control. All community members can access the survey by visiting Get Involved Lethbridge Snow Control Services level changes or by calling 311. The University of Lethbridge has a new head coach for their men's soccer program. BCN's Naveen Day met the new coach and has more about who he is.
Pronghorn Athletics at the University of Lethbridge announced the appointment of their new head coach for the men's soccer program Monday morning. Vikram Virk boasts nearly a decade of experience in youth development and professional soccer, spanning from Texas to British Columbia.
I'm a young coach, but I've definitely gained some experiences throughout my time, and each step has helped me learn different elements, whether it be on the pitch or off of it. I feel super ready, super prepared for this next step for myself.
His experience includes serving as an assistant coach for the North Texas SC and Pacific FC. He also served as head coach for the Victoria Highlanders FC. Players have already had a chance to work with Virk, and they say he's making a good first impression with the team.
Everything's been positive so far, in my opinion. Vic brings quite a bit of knowledge that's been good. We saw him yesterday and had a practice, and so far it's been nothing but positive, so we're happy to have him around.
Virk holds a Bachelor of Kinesiology with a major in Mind Sciences from the University of Calgary. The U of L feels this background will underscore his dedication to both the physical and mental aspects of performance. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Well, it was a gorgeous sunny day here in southern Alberta. Not much of an eclipse happening in these parts, but the sunshine shall return for most of the week, should continue, I should say, for most of the week, as well as the nice temperatures and that wind. I'll be back after the break with a full look at weather across the nation. Welcome back. Well, we have an incredible forecast ahead of us over the next week. Take a look at these beautiful temperatures. We're going to be well above average, except for that wind. We are still experiencing those 70k wind gusts tonight before diminishing down to 50. And then tomorrow on Tuesday, looking at wind gusts up to 30, then 50, then 70k winds. 14 degrees for a high, though. Tuesday night, overnight, could see a chance of a thunderstorm and a few showers, and also 70k winds. As we get into Wednesday, though, there's that single digit, 9 degrees for a high. Clear skies, though, up to 15 on Thursday. Beautiful 18-degree day on Friday with mainly cloudy skies. And then we could reach 20 degrees by the weekend. Look at that, 20 on Saturday, up to 18 on Sunday. Beautiful. That's our consolation for the wind. Average high for this time of year, 11 degrees. Average low, -2. 26 was our high temperature. That happened back in 1977 on this day. And on this day back in 1997, we were sitting at a chilly -12. Sun rose this morning at 6:52 and our sun set this evening at 8:15, giving us 13 hours, 22 minutes of daylight. Okay, as we look to the west coast tomorrow, 13 for a high in Vancouver, partly cloudy skies. Victoria could see some showers before clearing, 12 for a high there, up to 12 degrees in Edmonton. Last I looked, we could see a few showers there in Calgary, also seeing a chance of showers, 30%, also a risk of an afternoon thunderstorm, and a high of 11 degrees. As we look to the rest of the prairies here, 16 for a high across Saskatchewan, both Saskatoon and Regina. 18 is what Winnipeg's looking at tomorrow with partly cloudy skies. Now Toronto could see a 70% chance of showers and the risk of an afternoon thunderstorm. 16 for a high there, but a beautiful 19 degrees expected tomorrow in Ottawa, and beautiful clear skies tomorrow in Montreal, high of 16. As we look to Atlantic Canada tomorrow, clear skies in Fredericton, high of 7, high of 5 in Halifax. Charlottetown could see 30% chance of flurries, high of only 1 degree, and only 0 expected for the high. In St. John's, could see 2 centimeters of snow. So there you have it. That is your forecast. A recall has occurred on 2 popular brands of laundry detergent, including certain lots of Procter & Gamble Tide Pods and Gain Flings. According to the Government of Canada website, the product's packaging has the potential to be affected by a manufacturing defect, which renders the child-resistant packaging damaged or inoperable. The lack of child-resistant packaging could result in unintentional exposure to these products and lead to serious illness or injury. Consumers are advised to secure the recalled products and contact Procter & Gamble. A prepaid gift card, a cabinet latch, and an empty replacement bag with a child-resistant closure will be provided to those impacted. This week's interest rate decision from the Bank of Canada is unlikely to jumpstart the national housing market, but economists say it may be just a matter of months until home buyers come crawling back to the sidelines. The central bank is expected to hold its key rate steady for the sixth straight time Wednesday, but RBC Assistant Chief Economist Robert Hogue predicts a, quote, gradual rebound later this year throughout the central bank's eventual rate-cutting cycle. Insolvency firm M&P says some Canadians are feeling a little more optimistic about their debt with the prospect of interest rate cuts on the horizon. Its consumer debt index shows a significant rebound in the first quarter of this year after 12 months of low scores. M&P President Grant Bazian says Canadian households are still feeling the squeeze, but more than a quarter of Canadians say they perceive their current debt situation as better than it was a year ago. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is growing in use and popularity. There are some limitations, however, to its capabilities. Data analyst and AI expert Dr. Sydney Shapiro from the Dillon School of Business in Lethbridge shares how an example of not to use artificial intelligence.
A company went and replaced some of their phone answering with a robot. And that does save a lot of money. It saves a lot of time. In their case, it was the equivalent of 700 call agents. The only problem with this, though, is that when I call Air Canada with a complaint, I'm really asking them, can you make an exception? Can you figure it out? Can you help me? I'm stuck in this bizarre situation, which is not in the manual, and a person can help me out. AI can't do that. So I think that we're building systems that are getting smarter and are getting better, but a lot of people want to put AI, what we're talking about today, into this box of artificial general intelligence, like HAL from Space Odyssey, but that's not the reality. The reality is it's just an autocomplete system, but a very powerful one.
Catch that full interview with Dr. Sydney Shapiro and BCN's Michael Clausen coming up later in the show. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 4 points on the day to 22,260. The Dow was down 11 points to 38,892. The S&P 500 was down a point to 5202, and the Nasdaq was up 5 points to finish at 16,253. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 48 cents to 86.43 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 6 cents to $1.84 US. Gold was up $9.28 to $2,339.03 US an ounce, and silver was up 37 cents to $27.85 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.44 per bushel, barley's at $6.40, canola's at $14.50, and corn is at $7.57 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.15 to $179.40. Feeder cattle were up $1.60 to $239.30. Lean hogs were up 43 cents to $89.75, and the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.66 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, a total solar eclipse passed across parts of Atlantic and central Canada today, while the prairies experienced a partial eclipse. Parts of southern Ontario were plunged into complete darkness in the middle of the afternoon as the region experienced a solar eclipse totality. You can hear them being very excited there about it. The street lights even came on in downtown Toronto. Spectators from near and far gathered in viewing spots like Niagara Falls, hoping for a break in the cloud cover to witness the eclipse. And I'd say that they succeeded. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. Israel completes its invasion stage of the war against Gaza as they turn their attention to invading Rafah in the deep southern Gaza Strip. Also, the U.S. sends a warning to Iran and who is to blame for the famine occurring among the Palestinian people. We're going to dive into all of this and bring in our foreign affairs correspondent, Lisa Daftari, who is the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. She's joining me now from Los Angeles. Lisa, great to have you on once again. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. Okay, so Lisa, there's so much to unpack here. Let's start with Israel. So the Israel Defense Forces announced Sunday they're finished their invasion stage of the war, and they're now turning the focus to a possible future invasion plan of Rafah in the deep south of the Gaza Strip. So high-ranking Israeli officials have told media that this move was unrelated to pressure from the White House or the accidental killing of 7 aid workers last week. So, Lisa, do you believe this to be true? What are you hearing?
So, Jeanette, to break this all down, which is very, very complex, we have to start with the division of two different wars going on. One is what's actually going on in the military sense on the ground in the Middle East, and the other is the information war, what we hear in the media, how the media is spinning this, and the different narratives and criticisms that come out of that information war. Regarding the military war, it's absolutely true what you said. The IDF has determined that they have eradicated the threat that is coming from Gaza and will now put their attention on Rafah. If they need to go into Rafah, they will go into Rafah, regardless of what Kamala Harris says, regardless of what's coming out of the White House, regardless of world condemnation that's coming from the mainstream media and different activist groups that perhaps don't know or don't want to know what's going on the ground, or are just denying the fact that there are terrorists embedded in Rafah. If you recall, just a few weeks ago, 2 of the hostages, civilians, were found in Rafah. So we have plenty of reason to believe that the IDF needs to go into Rafah. I also want to remind everyone that we are 6 months into this war, regardless of, again, where you're getting your information from, what narratives you're hearing. Those innocent hostages have not been returned. So when people scream ceasefire, ceasefire, let's just remember that this war could end if the terrorists surrender and give back the hostages, but they keep refusing to. How many times have we had potential ceasefire proposals on the table? They have been agreed to by Israel, but rejected by Hamas, again, a terror organization. So there's a lot on the table here, but again, we have to separate between the actual military war, the facts, what's going on the ground, and what is being spun by the media, by activists, by university, by academians, and others who they fall on these tropes, and they're anti-Semitic, and they're anti-Zionist, and they're anti-Israel. And that is a whole different discussion as to why the world perpetuates these kinds of lies and misrepresentations. Obviously, nobody wants to see that death toll go up, whether it's on the Israeli side or the Palestinian side. Nobody wants to see children in the middle of this war. Nobody wants to see this war go on. And I am sure that civilians on both sides want this war to end. But again, those hostages have to come back, the terrorists have to surrender, and we have to really understand that this is an existential threat to Israel, where guns and bombs are being pointed and fired at Israel from many, many directions, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, whether it's Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, insurgencies in Syria and Iraq, and of course, it is all being puppeteered by Iran's regime.
Okay, now you mentioned civilians there. So we've heard that some people of Gaza have returned to their homes, which are mostly destroyed now, but many still can't return due to IDF preserving control of northern and central Gaza. What are you hearing?
Right. So look, this is a war-torn area right now. They have done their best job, and I have interviewed dozens, whether they're from the IDF or actual American military experts, who have told me that Israel has done a very precise job as best as possible. Obviously, there are casualties, there are mistakes that are made, but with regards to looking at this from a military standpoint, they have done their best to remove civilians from harm's way. And again, many homes destroyed, many lives are torn apart. And this is really the reality of this war. But again, before October 7th, we were covering a lot of protests on the ground in Gaza, and those were Gazans who were protesting Hamas, life under Hamas. Think about the lives of any individual who has to live at the hands of a terror group, like Iranians who have to live at the hands of the Islamic Republic. Just like, right now we're watching as Gazans have no other choice. These are Palestinians who are at the mercy of their own government. So when you find them in harm's way, again, the question is, who is to blame for this? Why doesn't their government surrender? Why don't they give back the hostages? Why do they ask these civilians to hide hostages in their homes, as has been found in many cases? Why are they asking, why do they teach Palestinian children arithmetic through death and through terrorism and through, again, the Palestinians are the biggest victims of this terrorism and Hamas. And I think that that's a very important thing to underscore here.
Famine has been a huge issue in Gaza, and all fingers, of course, around the world are pointing at Israel as being the cause of this. But Lisa, there is data being reported showing that Israel is not causing the Gazan famine. So can you maybe explain a little bit more about this?
Sure. And again, this goes back to the information war, right? So over the weekend, we got confirmation that when that aid truck was attacked and there was missiles flying and people lost their lives and they couldn't get the aid and the Palestinians were just jumping. I don't know if you saw the footage. It was something that, again, circulated very broadly in this information war. Israel was to blame, and information came out that it was actually Hamas that started firing. This is all over the weekend. But again, nobody changes their minds about these things because they have made up their minds to say Israel is responsible. More aid has come into Gaza than before the war right now because they want to make sure that aid goes. But again, how is that aid going to be dispersed in a way that's fair to the Palestinian people and not to Hamas, that it's not taken by the government? There's a reason why you see these poor Palestinians jump on top of that aid truck. It's because they know that their government won't allocate those the elements properly, or to get them the goods properly, or to get them food, or etc. If Hamas is their elected government, Hamas is responsible to get them the aid properly, and they don't. And that this is, again, the misinformation that's out there, that Israel is blocking the aid, that they're firing on the aid trucks. There was an interview by a lot of these Arab language media that interviewed the aid truck driver. And he told a very different story than what you saw in the media about who was attacking, how it went down. And, just again, the Palestinian people are the victims of their own government. And of course, this is yet another example of how we have to eradicate terrorism from the West, from the East, from the Middle East, all of it.
So you're saying Hamas is hoarding food, basically, and not giving it to
they're not people. Allowing, right, and they're hoarding the supplies. They're not letting people get through. They are putting the people in harm's way, whether they're using them as human shields, whether they're not allowing the hospitals to properly run as hospitals, but they're becoming headquarters to jihad. And again, with the aid, it's not being properly dispersed. So that's why you have Palestinians who cannot get the basic food items that they need.
It's very sad, for sure. Okay, so Lisa, last week an airstrike suspected to have been carried out by Israel eliminated 7 Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps officers, including the organization's Syrian chief, General Mohammed Zahadi. So Lisa, will there be any retaliation for this?
Well, there have been many threats, and Iran's regime says it's coming. This is obviously something that was a big hit, meaning these were major terror assets, major brains behind the terrorism, and that's exactly what they were doing. They were having a planning meeting. These are the brains behind so many terror strikes and plots, including October 7th. So this was a big hit, both in terms of morale and in terms of strategy. So Iran's regime won't take that. They're going to actually retaliate to show that they won't. They're not going to be the ones to take a hit. Now this puts Israel obviously on its guard, regardless of whether it's actual inside Israel or around the world. Iran's regime has said it may strike an embassy, which means it could be anywhere, Canada, United States, anywhere. But, obviously everyone is on high alert. The United States as well knows about this. The CIA said that there would have been an attack over the weekend. But, obviously all eyes are on this and going to, watch to see what happens. But the regime has doubled down to say that retaliation is coming.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Iran is saying that it received a response about this from the Biden administration. So Lisa, what message did the U.S. send to them?
look, this is what's very unfortunate about this war is that it's now taking place on the timeline of an American presidential election year, and that truly is affecting so many of the rhetoric, the decisions, the pivoting coming from the White House. Look, regardless of who is in the White House, Republican or Democrat, for as long as the state of Israel has been around, Israel is a major strategic and security ally for the United States in the Middle East. And for that reason, we usually don't see wavering on our position, our staunch support of Israel as a democratic ally. But now you're seeing some pivoting because there are elements within the left, within the Democrat Party, that are putting pressure on the White House to not be so pro-Israel. And that's why you're seeing some distance now between President Biden and his Israel policy, as well as State Department, Antony Blinken, who has warned, Israel and the IDF, has said that Bibi has to go. So many things that we would not have seen if we were not in this position of having this election year. So now Biden understands that there will be a retaliation, but he has warned Iran's regime to just stay away from American assets in the region, which, look, it throws our ally Israel under the bus yet again. And it just shows how worried the Biden administration is in not being as transparent as we'd like to be about how involved the United States is in this war, for fear of being in a war in an election year. So we saw the Houthis striking at U.S. assets and U.S. ships, and we said, no, that has nothing to do with Iran's regime. The Houthis came off of the U.S. terror list. We tried to separate, the White House tried to separate October 7th from what was happening with the Houthi attacks. Look, Iran's regime is pulling the puppet strings. So we have seen blood on their hands. They have killed Americans in Syria, in Iraq. Obviously, the Houthis now striking like ping pong all over, the place, and retaliating here and there. But, at the end of the day, trying to kind of make the narrative not so heightened and escalated because the Biden administration wants to create that separation. But it doesn't change the reality of what's going on the ground. It doesn't change the reality of what Iran's regime wants out of all of this.
Okay, so turning our eyes now to another part of the world here, Lisa. Microsoft has warned that China and North Korea will use artificial intelligence to influence elections this year. So they allege that the two countries use AI-generated videos, pictures, memes, recordings to create and disrupt. We're looking at fake news stories, basically. This is kind of alarming. What can you tell us about this?
It's alarming, yes. Surprising, no. I'm surprised they left Russia and Iran's regime off of that list. Look, our enemies, our adversaries, all around the world have always had an eye on U.S. elections, especially more recently. The nations that we just listed have also beefed up their cyber capabilities, have interfered where they can. Obviously, social media being an easy target. And now AI gives them yet another tool. So each presidential election, so 4 years have gone by, more sophistication in terms of the tools that they can use, but the agenda has always been there to interfere and use propaganda and misinformation to kind of interfere and to push the election in one way or another. Now, here in the United States, 4 years ago, they said they did try to interfere, but they didn't really affect the outcome of the election. So we shall see in this case. They try to interfere, but will they actually affect the outcome of the election?
I was going to ask what you think. I mean, it's an election year in the U.S. as well. Is there any chance that this could be prevalent as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
absolutely, it will be prevalent.
Yeah.
We have social media, we have AI, we have, where there's a will, there's a way, right? So we know that they want to interfere, and now they have more tools than ever at their disposal. And look, Americans, for the most part, especially the White House, they're looking the other way. We're involved in a war. Ukraine and Russia rages on. We have our crisis at our southern border. It's affecting our northern border with Canada, as you all know. So the economy, gas prices, food prices, there's so much going on that, this is, again, an easy target, an easy way to really insert themselves.
Yeah, for sure, Lisa. Looks like we're about out of time here. But once again, thanks so much for joining us today. We love having you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. That is Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, joining me today from Los Angeles.
As artificial intelligence grows in use and popularity, there are growing concerns about safety, security, and even how it will impact things like the job market here in Canada. Dr. Sydney Shapiro, a Dillon School of Business assistant professor with expertise in data analysis and AI, joins me today. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. Shapiro.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to chat about this topic with you. Can you tell us maybe a little bit more about the current development that's going on with artificial intelligence?
Well, I think the thing that's happened most recently is that everybody has access to what they're calling AI. Mostly what we're looking at is an autocomplete system, a massive autocomplete system that can guess what happens next. So you type in some text or you type in a prompt, and it puts together, based on guesses, what the next piece in the sequence is or the next pattern. And it does the same thing with images. Basically, you ask for an image and it can guess the image. Now there's even talk of new systems that can develop videos. So I think that there's a lot that's happening, but much of it is just available. So that's why people are using it, and you see it all the time and people are talking about it. But this technology has been around for a long time, whether it's expert computer systems, machine learning to make decisions better, or new systems, new pathways to find information.
So now your background is partially in data analysis, correct? So can you tell us how the data analysis kind of maybe led the way to artificial intelligence, or how artificial intelligence needs that to maybe harvest that data analysis?
So data is the oil that feeds AI, and you need a lot of it in order to make expert decisions. Really, artificial intelligence isn't good at coming up with brand new ideas. It's really good at recycling ideas it already knows about. So I think if it knows the solution, so for example, if you design an AI that writes a resume and it has millions of resumes to draw from, it will create something great that's the amalgam of that. But if it's never seen a resume before, that's a big problem. It won't work very well.
Gotcha.
So when you look at an organization that has lots of complicated data flowing through the organization and you want to find pathways to figure it out, that's a much better idea. And this has become really big in the past recent years in robotics. So imagine you were programming a robot. It would be really complicated to tell a robot how to program, make a cup of coffee, because it has to be a certain temperature and angles and timing. And if you wrote it step by step, that would be really difficult. But imagine you told the robot, here's the end product, here's the beginning product, figure it out, or look at all the possibilities and figure it out. Using different approaches, we can make all those thousands of steps in between seamless. So for many businesses, whatever they're trying to do, we can automate that by using the beginning, the end, and pieces in between to figure out what the steps are.
Well, it's really interesting. Is that kind of how AI has evolved, let's say over the last 5 or 10 years, or has it been a little bit different?
The biggest thing that's happened recently is with language, with using large language models or LLMs.
Gotcha.
And this idea is that certain words come after another. For example, you walk into a store and you say, I want to order a pizza. Most people in Canada are going to order a plain pizza or a pepperoni pizza. Those are the most popular choices.
Okay.
You could order any pizza, though. But if you think about it, statistically speaking, what's the most likely option? The computer has 3 or 4 different choices. It will pick one of them. And I think that pattern finding, but in really big context, means that it's really, really powerful. There are many other systems that we interact with every day that also use artificial intelligence, whether it's in our bank, they're trying to tell us here's some saving opportunities, in our accounting software, in our word processing, as we type, it could guess the next word. Even on our cell phone, it knows which Y-O-U-R-E or Y-O-U-R you're thinking of as you're typing. All of that is using systems to pick between different options based on patterns.
That's very interesting. I like that idea of pattern recognition, and maybe spatial awareness might be something too that's part of it. Could you maybe tell us some deficiencies that have been discovered to date?
So one of the biggest problems is that it only knows about things that it knows about. So if you're a university student, you probably heard the phrase, find the gap in the literature, like read a whole bunch of papers and find out what people don't know about. Mm-hmm. And that idea kind of makes sense. If you think about the periodic table, for a long time, they knew what elements there were so they could extrapolate what elements didn't exist. And then later on, when they had atomic bombs and hadron colliders, they figured out, they actually proved those elements. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that with making stuff up, because a project from Meta, the makers of Facebook, took 48 million papers, they fed it into an engine called Galactica, and they said, what's missing? And it said, well, I can't find any papers on people eating glass. Maybe that's like give you superpowers or something, like maybe that's a solution. And the problem is that even though there's a gap, it doesn't make sense. The reason why there's no papers is because that's not something that we investigated. So it's difficult to make things up and then work backwards and make it a reality. If that was possible, then I'd be living in Harry Potter world. But unfortunately, it goes the other way. We first find things in real life and then we write about them. So just because you could describe something doesn't necessarily make it real.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, I had mentioned the spatial awareness. Do you think that might be coming down the road fairly soon?
Definitely. I think that as we look at how we could put different pieces of information together and get better decision making out of it, there's many ways that we can do that and save the amount of figuring out the time in between that it takes to run through all the steps. I saw an amazing project the other day. Somebody who had never programmed anything before in their life asked ChatGPT how to make an app, and they built an app called Point an Arrow to the Galactic Center. So no matter where you are on Earth, it always tells you where the center of the Milky Way is.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's kind of neat. I like that. I like looking at the stars. That sounds really interesting. So do you think, looking at the other side of the coin, do you think that artificial intelligence could backfire on the companies that are automating with it?
Definitely. I mean, I think the problem is that there's not many very good business cases of when to use AI to replace pieces. Like, for example, recently in the last couple of days, a company went and replaced some of their phone answering with a robot. And that does save a lot of money. It saves a lot of time. In their case, it was the equivalent of 700 call agents.
Wow.
The only problem with this, though, is that when I call Air Canada with a complaint, I'm really asking them, can you make an exception? Can you figure it out? Can you help me? I'm stuck in this bizarre situation, which is not in the manual.
Yeah.
And a person can help me out. AI can't do that. So I think that we're building systems that are getting smarter and are getting better, but a lot of people want to put AI, what we're talking about today, into this box of artificial general intelligence, like HAL from Space Odyssey,
right.
but that's not the reality. The reality is it's just an autocomplete system, but a very powerful one. So we could, figure things out that already exist, but it's not the panacea to all our problems. Ultimately, AI is a tool. So in business, if we're looking to use that tool to make money or save money, we really have to think of a way that complements what we're already doing and leverages that ability.
Well, I was really hoping for something like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but that's probably a bit far off.
So one of the interesting things is that we're talking a lot about sci-fi because that's where this idea of artificial intelligence comes from.
Gotcha.
And if you look at Star Trek in the 60s, the idea that you could talk to a computer and it would talk to you was so fantastical that was like impossible, but we could see it maybe one day happening in the future.
Yeah.
Now we actually have software that you could talk to and it responds to you and it has this huge memory behind it. The only catch is that the speed that we've developed the software to run AI systems has not caught up to the speed that we've developed the hardware side.
Oh, interesting.
So you might have heard Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, saying we need $7 trillion to build a better computer to make. So that's the problem, that we're really lagging behind in processing. And that's why even though we have tons of information in these very large AI models, they can't solve everything, or maybe they can't solve anything.
Right. So then is this like a job for quantum computers, or is quantum computing not even at that level?
The idea of quantum computing being used for AI is very attractive. A lot of people are looking into this. It doesn't exist right now, but it is something people are thinking about. The idea that if I could have many states and quantum computing happening at the same time, I could have many AI possibilities. I think the next big thing, like that we could see in the future, just like we look from Star Trek into the future to today, is explainable AI. So when it makes a decision, why did it make a decision? If it could choose from 1,000 different options, it picked one. And I think this is the big difference between people and computers. If a person walks into a pizza store, they order pepperoni. But if a computer looks at all the different options, it actually calculates every single bizarre choice against every single other bizarre choice before ending up at the most likely one. And that's really the problem. Imagine we use that pizza bot, but as a doctor, sometimes when I go to the doctor, I don't have the most obvious, most common problem. I want the doctor to check me and say, oh, you're the 1% of people that has a super exotic rare disease. Here's special medicine for you, right? So automating things that goes with what's most likely doesn't usually work very well.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So then if we ask the question about jobs being at risk through AI, that sounds like we could actually be quite far down the road from that happening, but what's your take on that?
I think the economy is changing, and I think it depends what your job is. If you're a resume writer, then your job is already threatened today. If you do most other work, then not yet. It's part of automation, robotics, and there is an industrial revolution happening, changing the way that we work. And that's definitely going to be accelerated by using AI, because the AI systems that are inside of it can automate a lot of things. But that doesn't mean that it completely replaces jobs. You still need a person with a brain deciding what to do and to give it instructions. If you use any of these AI tools, you'll notice that they're not very good unless you continuously inform it over and over and over again what exactly you want, and then the content gets better and better as it gets more fine-tuned.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
I think that these are tools, and the economy is going to change to use these tools. And as people's jobs change to incorporate more AI, they're going to help people as opposed to replace them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one of the other questions that would probably come up, I know it came up here internally, is the legal system. So has there been any implications related to the legal system with artificial intelligence?
It's funny that you say that, because in BC and in the US recently, there's been cases where lawyers made up citations that didn't exist.
Wow.
Using AI systems, just asking for it, and it hallucinated and came up with information that sounds right. It sounds like it would logically follow, but those cases never happened.
Interesting.
So in both cases, the judges weren't very happy.
I can
I
imagine.
think that we have a responsibility to make sure that we're using AI responsibly and that the way that we're using it makes sense. In the legal system, especially when you look at AI-generated images and artist copyright and fair use, there's many lawsuits that are going on now saying that although you might not be copying my exact work, if you stole all of my work or used it, and then you're generating stuff that looks like my work, is that still covered by copyright? And our copyright laws in Canada and the US are written well before AI was invented. So I think it's really a process of the legal system catching up, and through these cases, we'll get a much better idea of what information can be used, what can't be used, and how that information could be used inside a model to predict new or mixed up information.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like artificial intelligence plagiarizing someone. Totally get that.
Exactly.
Could you provide maybe more examples of how AI can help business to maybe do better at targeting their advertising?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different factors, and it's really effective to do micro-targeting. So if I have 1,000 customers and I look at all these different preferences, an ad would be really effective. It said, hey, do you like chicken wings? We like chicken wings too. Come on in and buy something. But it's difficult to really go through that because you would spend hundreds of hours looking through all your customers to find that information. Building AI systems that are automated and can have predictable pathways will find interesting aspects of your customer, correlations or connections between customers, and it helps you make much better informed decisions. The biggest problem that companies deal with is churn, that people are customers and then they stop being customers. And if we could better predict why that happens, we could invite new customers in and retain old customers at a much higher level. We could automate some of that data analysis using AI.
Well, that's really smart. And it's almost like looking at the issue from a different perspective, I would think. Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about maybe sustainability concerns around AI?
So I think sustainability is a big issue. Not only is AI generally not very environmentally friendly, it costs an enormous amount of power to run. The question is, what does it actually do? So the companies that make it would like you to use it in your business for everything, but the reality is it doesn't work that well yet, and it makes mistakes. Recently, it's not about AI, but it's about a chatbot. Air Canada had a chatbot that told somebody wrong information, and the court said they had to honor their chatbot, whatever they said.
That makes sense.
And if you expand that to AI that could answer anything, that becomes a bigger problem. So in terms of sustainability, the data that's inside of it needs to keep on growing, but at the same time, it has to be high quality. And we want to make sure that there's an objective source of truth. For example, if I ask an AI to find me an airplane ticket, I don't want it to make up an airplane ticket. I want me to find a real one. Same thing's true with most things that we could use it for to buy things. So there still has to be real databases with real information, but using AI, maybe we could sort it more efficiently or find things that I'm looking for, or maybe even discover patterns I didn't know about.
Right. Well, that makes sense. And I never even thought about the liability of a corporation company using artificial intelligence and it gives the wrong answer. They're on the hook for that. I would like to ask you, though, just before we go, what effect could AI like ChatGPT have on student learning?
So I think that huge models like ChatGPT or Gemini are gigantic and try to know everything. If we made them smaller and more narrow, they could do things like tutor students, answer questions, help with homework. I think that we were originally really worried about this whole scale cheating, like universities are going to go away because everyone will just use it. But it doesn't produce quality. It really just produces stuff. And if we really build this as a tool and help students learn how to use it the right way, ultimately they could take their ideas and find a basis for it, improve it writing, learn the material better, have somebody to talk to if they have any questions. So there's many ways that AI can be leveraged to really be effective at helping education.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Dr. Shapiro, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
It was great to have you on. That was Dr. Sidney Shapiro. He is an assistant professor at the Dillon School of Business here in Lethbridge at the U of L. For all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Michael Clausen. Thanks very much for watching.